Hey, everybody. Kelly here from Grace for Living After Loss. Today, we're going to be discussing the science of healing from grief. Yes, the science. Turns out there is a science behind it, and that science has evolved over time. So today, we're going to unpack what is the science behind healing from grief and loss. We're going to talk about some practical applications that you can use, and stick around to the end because we're going to have details on how you can enter for a giveaway at the end of our video. So let's get after it. First of all, let's just discuss the fact that science in every single area has changed and evolved over time, but for some reason, we're still using outdated models when it comes to grief and loss. Or we're using models that only address emotions instead of looking at grief holistically. Grief affects our emotions, it affects our thoughts, it affects our physical bodies. It's a holistic experience and it needs to be dealt with holistically. Now, if you've watched any of the videos here, you know that here at Grace for Living After Loss, we use a faith-based and neuroscience-informed process. And faith absolutely is and was part of our healing. God is the author of our healing. But we can absolutely partner with science and the processes of science to facilitate healing. I know a lot of Christians feel some kind of way about science, and sometimes they feel like science is at odds with faith. But I think that science is the language that describes God's goodness. Science gives us processes and formulas and language around the majesty that is God and all that He created in the earth. And in my own life, neuroscience really was a radical, transformative tool to help me move through grief and loss. And that is what I have found to be true. So neuroscience, what is it? Neuroscience is the study of our minds. We've learned so much about how our minds work, and more importantly, how our minds heal. You know, they used to think that even our IQ was static and that our brain was just kind of in this one fixed state. But now they know that that's not true. There's actually a concept and a theory of neuroplasticity, which means that your mind is always changing and evolving. And how your mind is changing and evolving is based on what you're thinking, the things that you think about. They now know that thoughts are not just random ethereal things that exist, you know, out in Never Never Land. Thoughts create landscape in your brain. Thoughts are biological things, not just any thought that races through your mind, but when you think a thought, it actually changes the landscape in your mind. You're creating a new frontier. Thoughts create new biological matter in your brain, and it creates what we call neural pathways. Now, a neural pathway is a loop, if you will, and the thoughts that you think over and over again become ingrained neural pathways in your mind. And if you think it long enough, it becomes habitual. It moves from not only your conscious mind, but your subconscious mind. And your subconscious mind is the place where we find meaning for things. It is the lens that we look through the world with. So if you think thoughts long enough, eventually that will become fact. That will become implicit fact, and your brain will begin to interpret all future information based on that fact. Now, here's the good and the bad in it of that for those of us that are dealing with grief. Let's start with the bad. The bad is if you find yourself meditating on loss and focusing on the pain of loss and the reality that your loved one is gone and that you'll never see them again and how much it hurts and all that, if that's what you choose to focus on and you think that over and over and over again, that is going to move to your subconscious mind. And then all future information is going to be filtered through that. So even if you find reasons to be happy, even if you find sources for healing, it's going to get blocked and obstructed because the instruction you've given your brain is that you'll never recover, that the pain is so immense, all that stuff. Now, let's get to the good news. The good news is no matter how long you've been thinking that way, we can change things. We can rewire things. We can learn to interrupt. It's called a trauma loop. When you think about a traumatic thought over and over again, you create a trauma loop. And not only does that trauma get imprinted on your subconscious mind, but physically speaking, you're re-traumatizing yourself over and over again. Every time you go through that trauma loop, you're releasing adrenaline and cortisol and all the chemicals and hormones that go along with trauma. Okay, so it's very damaging to your body when you do that over and over again. The other thing is it has become It has become habitual. It has become, like I said, just a state of belief. It becomes the lens that you look through. But we can reverse that. When we learn how to interrupt those trauma loops and not go down that same path over and over again, and more importantly, when we learn to replace trauma loops with healthy, healing, truthful thoughts, we can reverse it. We can stop that trauma loop, and then we can replace it with something healthy. And to the same measure that we may have inflicted pain on ourselves and harm, we can also administer healing to ourselves and hope and peace and joy, all of that. But it starts with your thought life. Now, the other tricky thing that I want to stress is that it isn't instant. It isn't automatic. Like, it doesn't just happen instantly. Much like any other, health and wellness thing in our lives, we need to do it consistently over a period of time. So here's some of the important numbers for you to remember with that. It takes 21 days to implant a thought, or conversely, it takes 21 days to dismantle a thought. So whether you're trying to implant a new positive thought or dismantle a negative destructive thought, it's going to take 21 days to do that. But then it takes 63 days for that thing to become automatic or to move from your conscious to your subconscious. So the thing we need to do, the scientific process for dealing with grief and kind of righting our ship, is to identify first the obstructive thoughts, the destructive thoughts, the thoughts that are harmful to us, the thoughts that are not helping us to heal. And we need to flip those around and replace them with helpful, healing, hope-filled thoughts. And we need to do that for 63 days, okay? And if you have a lot of thoughts, that process may take a while, because you may need to do that with more than one thought. That is the work that we do with people at Grace for Living After Loss. We help them to identify, first of all, which thoughts are destructive or not helpful, and how can we rewire those thoughts to be healthy, healing, and whole. And we help walk them through that. But I'm here to tell you that there is a science to grief recovery, and the outdated models that only focus on our feelings, because you guys, feelings is actually the last thing that happens. Feelings is just your thermometer to let you know if something's good or bad. Your feelings are never meant to lead the show. They're the thermometer to let you know if what's going on with you is positive or not. So what happens is there's a stimulus in your environment, and then you have a thought about it. And that thought is going to check with your subconscious mind to see how they should feel about it. And then the last step is you have a feeling, right? So you have action, thought, processing the thought, and feeling. That's why it's so important for us to program our subconscious mind to have positive thoughts about our future and the loss and what it means to us, so that when something comes into our mind, we have a trigger or something reminds us of the loss, we now have a new program that it gets filtered through so that we can move forward in healing and health and wholeness. This is possible. Science shows us that. And like I said, the outdated models of the Kubler-Ross method and the 5 stages of grief, first of all, that was based on a woman who was studying people who were dying. It wasn't people who had lost a loved one. It was someone who was contemplating their own passing. Second of all, that model was back from the 1970s. Can you think of any other area of life that we are still doing things like they did back in the 1970s? And can you think of any area of science that we are still operating based on just information from the 1970s that hasn't been updated? No, we are far, far behind when it comes to grief and loss, and we are far behind from applying new sciences to the subject of grief and loss. And that's what I'm here to do. So welcome to the new era of grief recovery. Welcome to the space where we utilize the latest available information about neuroscience and how our minds work to actually rewire our brains, get our brains back to a place of healing and wholeness, and step into our future with confidence. Now, you've hung around until the end of the video, and I did make a promise. We are going to be doing a promotion with this video specifically. If you drop a comment below, share whatever you like. Share if you agree, if you disagree, if you have a question, if you're grieving someone right now and you want to share about them, but drop a comment below. And every Friday, we are going to be picking a winner out of the comments from that week and sending them a copy of my book, You're Not Crazy, You're Grieving. So drop a comment below and we will check out for a winner for that. Obviously, if this has helped you in any way, if you are intrigued or inspired or encouraged by this information, subscribe to the channel. Be sure to like the video and hang out for all the other topics we share, which is everything related to grief recovery, tips, tools, and tricks on how to move through grief and get back to living a life that you love. Until next time, guys, we'll see ya.